What was the creepiest experience in your own home? In a house living with my girlfriend and another couple. I'm watching TV at around 2 a.m. in the living room, girlfriend is asleep, other guy is asleep, and I assume the other girl is out in her study, which you had to go outside to get to, so the back door is unlocked. From my vantage point, you can see a portion of the kitchen, which is next to the back door. I hear the back door swing open, assume it's my housemate, and continue watching my TV show. About 15 minutes later, I happen to glance through the doorway into the kitchen, as I had not heard my housemate either leave the house again or wander through to the bedrooms. House is quite loud, and there's a guy standing in the corner of the kitchen staring at me. He had a brown jacket on, dark eyes and dark hair, and was clutching a bottle of my Midori, shoulders slumped, staring at me. When he sees that I have noticed him, he moves. I get up from the floor and chase him to the kitchen, but he's gone. Carefully go out the back, nobody there, out the front, nope, in the driveway, down the street, just nowhere to be found. Still gives me chills thinking about it. One night when I was about 10, my two sisters and I were at home alone while my mom was working. Our house was always very popular with young hooligans, so it was not uncommon for people to just wander around in our yard, and it normally was not horrifying. But on this particular evening, someone had broken the glass on our back window, and none of us had realized it. So I'm hanging out in the room with the broken window, and someone sticks their hand in and pulls down the blinds. I freaked out, ran into the front room, and stared at the door. We called the cops, and oddly enough they told us to stay in the house, which we stupidly did, as the guy would disappear and reappear every minute or two. He did not speak, he did not attempt to open the door, he just watched us, his eyes and hand illuminated by the television in the room. Once the cops showed up he took off, and they never did find him. Creepy stuff. One time I was looking after my mom's pug. I live in an old apartment, and outside my kitchen window is another flat roof. It was like 11 p.m., so not even that late. The dog was sleeping in the kitchen, and he woke up and started very, very quietly barking and growling. My girlfriend and I were in bed, so I told him to chill out. He's a really good dog, and if you tell him something he'll do it. But he just kept going with the low growling, looking at me, then turning and pointing to the kitchen window like, "You need to look here, dumbass." I finally got up to check it out. As soon as I did, the dog charged out, snarling and jumping at the window. I saw two guys at my window trying to get the screen off. They heard the dog, looked up, and were met with me, completely without clothes, up on the counter, pounding on the wall and yelling that I was going to make them regret ever coming near my place. My girlfriend went nuts, screaming, and they actually jumped off the roof. It's a solid drop down to the next roof. The next few weeks, I really wished I had, snuck out the other window and surprised them with a baseball bat or something, but when I saw someone trying to break into my home, it just triggered my smash and kill immediately reflex, and there happened to be a wall between us. To this day, I'm impressed by how smart that dog is. He was watching those idiots the whole time, and they did not know until he wanted them to. He could have saved our lives for all I know. Back in junior high, the first time my parents left town and left me alone for a week. It's going good. I stayed in the basement and the entrance to the hallway that leads to my room had decorative beads hanging in the entryway. I'm in my room watching TV with my faithful dog, Smokey, laying at the foot of the bed. All of a sudden he starts barking wildly, a bark I'd never heard from him, almost a cry. I think something is wrong with him, and just as I almost get a hand on him, he jumps off the bed and dives under it completely silent. I get to the floor to look under the bed for him, and I hear the beads in the entryway start to rattle together as if someone ran into them with a lot of force. I sit there scared shitless for a bit, then grab a bat and investigate. The beads are still swinging with force, every door and window in the house is still locked from the inside, there are not any air vents close to the beads, and Smokey refused to come out from under the bed for another 2 hours. To this day, I have no idea what caused those beads to rattle. This was when I was in high school. I'm chilling in the living room with my dog sleeping by my feet, watching TV. Suddenly, my dog jumps up and runs to the stairs, which are right off the living room. Now, my dog would normally never bark unless the doorbell rang. This time he went into attack mode, growling, barking, his hair rising on end, then he would look at me, trying to see if I would call him back. I was scared shitless. No one could have come home because you have to come through the living room to get to the stairs, so no one could sneak in. After a minute, he would not let up. He kept acting like something was there, just something I could not see. I had to sit there as my dog acted like he was ready to rip someone's throat out, until finally he walked back to my feet looking proud of himself. I like to think he scared something off that day, but I was very happy when we moved. I was like 12, and I was asleep in my family's living room since I was sick and it was winter. My house has terrible insulation and my room was cold, family room was warm. So I was asleep, and at around 2 a.m., I'm woken up by the feeling that someone is right there. I always slept with a flashlight since I read, so it was in my hands, and I turned it on and pointed it in the direction of where I thought the guy was. Right there, just a foot away from me, was a guy staring right into my face. The light hit his face, and he turned and ran away. I let out a blood-curdling, bloody murder scream, and my mom and dad came running downstairs. Turns out he had freaking broken into our house and then stood there staring at me. That still creeps me out. This happened about 15 years ago. My mom works nights as a nurse and my brothers had moved out, so it was only my dad and me at home. The night in question, I was reading in bed and my dad was asleep. I could tell by the snoring. I heard some light tapping on the front door, which was a sliding glass door. My room had a window where I could see the front door, so I sat up to look out my window. Nothing. I thought, meh, could be the wind. So I kept reading and about 20 seconds later I heard this really loud scratching on the back door, and it was so loud it woke up my dad, which was strange. He yells out, "Matt, what the fuck are you doing? Get in bed," and I yelled back, "I am in bed." Not a second after the words left my mouth, we heard loud rushed footsteps, sort of soft sounding, like when you run on wooden floors with socks on, towards the front door. As I sat up to look at the front door, shaking violently, I saw the door just stop sliding. It was open about 8 inches. It was not open 20 seconds before when I looked, but I could not see anything. My dad ran into my room, checked if I was all right, and then went to check outside. He came back in and closed the front door, checked the back door, which was locked. I could not get to sleep, and my dad stayed up with me. I was so scared. Also strange about it all, Dad had locked the front door that night. He always used to say goodbye to Mum as she left for work and would always lock the door behind her. We did not really talk about it that night. I must have been about 12 or 13, still innocent. But a few years later we did. We thought it could have been someone trying to rob us or worse, but we could never figure out how they unlocked the front door. It had a pin and a lock you could only unlock from the inside. I tried to convince him it was a ghost. He never bought that. I just think we may have been really fucking lucky. The scratching sound on the back door still haunts my dreams, and why? Why scratch on the back door or tap on the front door before entering? I grew up in a 112-year-old Victorian in Connecticut. While it appeared as though the entire house should have been haunted, the only source of anything creepy was the second-floor bathroom that was at the base of the attic stairs. Each of my parents has their own story from that room. My dad tells a story about how one day, when he was giving my older brother a bath, who was about 3 at the time, in the white clawfoot tub, my brother stopped playing with his bath toys for a moment. He then calmly looked up at my dad and said, "This is where I died." The white light, and then kept playing again. My dad suspects someone electrocuted themselves in the tub. A few years later, when I was 2 and my dad and brother were off on a Boy Scouts trip, my mom recalls a night where she heard me get up and walk down to the bathroom. She could hear me humming and tinkling. Now, I was still potty training, so Mom wanted to get up and check on me. When she rolled over, I was lying beside her, and the humming stopped. We moved. For Christmas 2012, my mom had gotten my dad a really nice watch. By March, he had lost it for a few days, but found it in the cushions of the chair in the living room. Then, in early June, he lost it again. He is totally scatterbrained. He thought he probably lost it in the cushions again, so he looked in the couch and the chair and could not find it. My brother, my dad, and I decided to look harder and completely tore apart the house looking for it. We had flipped every cushion, checked every drawer, closet, purse, gym bag, and bed in the entire house. We looked everywhere and left no stone unturned, so to speak. We still could not find it. My dad checked his car, his work, the gym, my grandparents' house, and asked everyone he came across if they had seen his watch. Finally, after a few weeks of diligently searching, he kind of gave up and accepted the fact that maybe someone at his work or his gym stole it, or that he had maybe left it at a doctor's office or something like that. Basically, he had assumed that he would never see it again. Fast forward to the middle of July. My dad works really bizarre hours, and on this particular day, he had to leave for work at 3:30 a.m. When he woke up, my mom and brother were asleep, and I was staying the night at my best friend's house. When he came downstairs, he found the lost watch just sitting on the kitchen counter, face down, as if he had taken it off the night before and set it there. He assumed that one of us had found it after he went to bed the night before, so he texted my mom thanking her for finding the watch. She responded to his text saying that neither she nor my brother had found it, and there was no way I found it and put it there since I was staying elsewhere for the night. My mom had cleaned the kitchen before she went to bed, and there was no watch on the counter, but when my dad woke up, the watch that had been missing for over a month had simply reappeared. No one knows how the watch got there, and my dad still thinks that maybe everyone is fucking with him and that one of us took it and replaced it as a joke. These are my 4 most logical explanations for what happened. My mom or brother sleepwalks and no one knows. Whoever the sleepwalker is took the watch during an episode, hid it while they were asleep, and then retrieved it during another sleepwalking episode over a month later. Someone broke into our house, stole the watch, felt guilty about it, and broke back in during the night to replace it, even though that would be fairly impossible because we have a house alarm that we set religiously every night and when we leave. Someone else lives in our house, unbeknownst to us, or maybe ghosts. My wife and my kid were staying out overnight, and I had the house to myself. I went to take a shower, leaving the washroom door open, such a luxury. Though being energy conscious, I of course left the lights out in the hallway. Anyway, I had a nice long hot shower, and I was getting out when something caught my eye. I saw a tall man's bald head as he walked slowly and silently across the dark open doorway to the washroom. My heart nearly stopped on the spot. The outside doors were of course locked. I had not heard anyone coming in. How did this guy get in my house? What did he want? He must have heard me showering. He could see the light was on. Trembling in terror, I peeked out the door all wet, clutching a tiny pair of scissors used to trim my nails, the most inadequate of weapons, but the only one available, and discovered all the answers. My son had one of those Mylar birthday balloons filled with helium. It was usually pressed up against the ceiling, but it must have become partly deflated. It was floating 6 feet off the ground. It had floated in the air currents right by the door, gleaming in the light from the bathroom, looking just like a man's bald head, walking slowly and purposefully across the doorway. During early COVID, I lived on my own in a flat in an apartment building. One day at around 6 a.m., I woke up to a frantic knocking on my entrance door. I got out of bed, looked through the door's spy hole, but saw nobody and thought it was a prank by some kids. While I was turning away, I heard the knocking again with some hissing-like noises mixed in. Another look, still nothing, so I carefully opened the door. In front of it, my neighbor, a small girl, around 20 years old, was kneeling on my doormat, eyes wide open, clutching her throat with both hands and rasping that something was stuck. She was crying in pure terror and panic, apparently with her mom on speakerphone, both of them screaming like trapped animals. I asked her if she could still breathe. She nodded, so I called an ambulance and told them what I knew. The hotline asked if she had trouble breathing, yes, but not choking, and if she was sweaty. The ambulance took 20 minutes to arrive at my apartment, as it took them some time to switch into hazmat gear. Apparently, breathing problems and heavy sweating were indicators of COVID-induced choking. It turned out she did not have COVID at all, but instead got a piece of plastic from a frozen yogurt container that she had for breakfast stuck in her throat. I was a young mother with 2 very young children. My husband worked nights, leaving me alone with my 2 children. My daughter was an infant, and we had a baby monitor. One night, I heard a small baby crying, so I went into her room to find her sleeping peacefully. This continued for many nights, and I thought I was just imagining things. Then, one night, I heard a baby crying and went into the room. As I was checking on my daughter, I heard a woman softly singing a lullaby and whispering gently to soothe a baby. To say all the hairs on my body raised is an understatement. I told my husband what happened, and he said I probably was having a dream, as it happened late at night. A few days later, I met my neighbor, who also had a very young girl. We started talking, and she mentioned weird noises from her baby monitor and how she was going to return it to the store. It was at that moment we both realized we were picking up each other's baby monitors. So the lady singing lullabies was her. I live in an apartment. They did inspections and minor repairs on the breaker boxes a few years ago. They came in and did mine, and the next day, with no notice, I hear a literal banging on my door. I was going to ignore it because it was 9 a.m. and I genuinely did not care. But then I hear slamming. I open my bedroom door, which faces the front door, and a grown man body slammed my door off the hinges. I scream, "What is wrong with you?" at him, and he did not really speak English. Is okay. My door frame was shattered. He communicated that he needed to see if the paint around the breaker box needed repainting. Looks in my closet where it was, leaves, and comes back with a nail and hammer. Kind of loosely reattached my door and hammered in the frame. I'm dumbfounded. He leaves. I go to the office, where no one believed me for a hot minute. They have a maintenance man follow me and he fixes my door for real. I never saw that one repair guy again. I struggle to sometimes leave my apartment, and part of it is not trusting my maintenance man because of that experience. It gave me mild PTSD that does not complement my agoraphobia. I was young, in the house babysitting my little sister. It was early hours of the morning, and there was frantic knocking at the front door asking for help. It sounded like my neighbor, so I opened it. In steps a drunken man I do not know. He walks into the house and into the living room and starts pacing. My little sister comes to the top of the stairs. I whisper for her to hide. I ask the man what he needs, and he tells me he needs the police. I call 999 and try to explain vaguely what is going on, as I do not want to provoke him. The lady on the phone asks me to try and get him to leave the house and wait for them outside. He had been involved in an assault on a taxi driver, and she is concerned that I am alone. I was about 13 years old, with a highly intoxicated, possibly dangerous man. I ask him to wait outside, and after some conversation, he does. I lock the door as quickly as I can, and I cry. I check on my sister, and we go to bed. Police did not check on me to see if anything had happened. Luckily, nothing did. It could have gone horribly wrong. Grateful it did not. When I was in my teens, my family rented this beautiful house. It was huge. It was 2 stories. Upstairs, it had 3 bedrooms, a bathroom, a kitchen, a sunroom, and a lounge room. Downstairs, it had a second lounge room, a laundry, and behind the stairs on the bottom floor, it had a little walkway that led to 2 doors. One door would take you into the garage, and the other door led to an old abandoned darkroom and what appeared to be an abandoned bedroom. It was directly on the dirt, with no flooring, and a smashed-up bed. I hated the bottom story of that house. Every time you walked down the stairs, it felt like someone was watching you from the walkway. It felt angry, ominous, and threatening. It was terrifying. I actively avoided going downstairs, but occasionally you would be in the upstairs lounge room and feel the same presence watching you from the top of the staircase. The man who owned the house was in a nursing home with dementia, and his daughter was handling the rental. Weirdly enough, the old man died one day, and all the strange presences went away too. We discussed it years later, and it turns out everyone in the house had similar experiences. I do not know if it was real, but it was scary. About 9 years ago, I was home on summer break, and it was my habit to stay up late browsing online many nights. I live in a small suburb, so there is not much local traffic at night. One particular night, I was at my computer as usual watching YouTube around 1 a.m. There was heavy rain outside and high wind, so tree branches were bumping into the side of the house from time to time. I was at my desk, which was about 15 feet away from the front door, when I heard a soft thump against the door. I figured it was just the wind blowing a branch against the house, so I ignored it. A few seconds afterward, there was a very heavy thud against the front door. At that point, I realized it was not the wind at all, and I dashed upstairs to alert my dad that something was going on. I looked out the front window down at the front step and did not see anything, so about 10 minutes later, I opened the door to see suitcases on the front step. Our family had returned from a trip to a different state about 2 weeks prior, and the airline had misplaced the luggage after the return flight. Apparently, they had found the luggage and decided to drop it off at 1 a.m. in a heavy rainstorm. Definitely alarming when it happened, but non-creepy in the end. A couple of years back, I woke up at 3 a.m. to see someone walk past my bedroom door. I called out in my just woken up, not thinking haze, thinking maybe my boyfriend had come over while I was sleeping, but got no response, so I knew it was not him. I got out of bed, stupidly forgetting to take my phone or any kind of defensive item with me, and went into the front room where the light was on, only to be met with a random guy staring at one of the walls. I asked him who he was and got no answer. At this point, I had actually woken up enough to realize I could really be in trouble, so I ran back to the bedroom, grabbed my phone, and ran outside while calling the police, who showed up within a few minutes. It turns out the guy was mentally ill, and to this day, neither myself nor the police know how he got in. One day while I was working afternoons a couple of years back, I woke up around 10 a.m. and started watching American Dad before getting up. Next thing you know, I hear my back door open. A normal thing in our home since we only use the back door. But no one was supposed to be home yet. I assumed it was my mom and did not think anything of it. Then I heard footsteps coming up the stairs, as my bedroom was on the second floor. I called out to my mom and got no response. Then my door cracked open and a head popped in. It was a man in his 30s with a blonde beard and a big mane of greasy hair who looked shocked to see me. At the time, I was about 260 pounds, 6 feet 3 inches, and 20 years old, male. Before I could even process what was happening, he asked, "Is this the Smith residence?" Or something like that, to which I replied, "No." He made a swift exit, and before I could recollect my thoughts, he was no longer even in the driveway. I talked to a family friend who is a veteran police officer. Turns out a man had been pulling this kind of stunt to rob people in nearby towns. I was about 21 or 22 and living by myself at the time, and I left my window open on a pleasant night. It was low enough to the ground that you could get in if you really tried, but the screen wasn't easy to take off, and I lived in a fairly safe neighborhood, so I didn't even think twice about it. I woke up in the middle of the night because I smelled smoke, and I reached out to turn on my lamp, and my hand hit what was very obviously a person. My brain fully woke up at that point, and I realized there was a shirtless man in my bedroom, smoking a cigarette and staring at me. I remember yelling for him to get out, and I must have spooked him just as badly as he spooked me because he leapt out my window and took off. I slammed it shut and moved a bookcase in front of it, and when I went out the next morning in the daylight, I found the screen sitting against the house. I didn't sleep the rest of the night, and I haven't slept with a window more than cracked ever since. I also absolutely refuse to live on the ground floor of a building. I don't know if he was planning to rob me or hurt me or both, but it was absolutely terrifying and makes me wonder how many times it happened and I didn't wake up. I was home from university for the summer and did not have a job, so I was home alone while everyone was at work. I live in a small village on a quiet street, so it was completely normal to have all the windows and doors open during the day. Late in the afternoon, I got a call from my dad. "I'm around the corner but struggling to get into the street. I'll explain when I'm home, but lock all the doors, close the windows, and go upstairs." This was obviously strange. We do not live in a bad area, and my dad's sense of humor is not that mean, but the tone in his voice made me do it without hesitation. Everything closed and locked, and upstairs I went. A few minutes later, I got a second call from my dad. "Some police are going to be going through the side gate into the back garden to check the shed. I'll be home soon." Again, I was terrified but knew to just ask later. I stayed upstairs but did see armed police checking the back garden. When my dad finally got home, I obviously asked what had happened. Turns out some 16-year-old kid on our street had taken some legal highs, hurt a neighbor with a knife, then ran off. Absolutely terrifying, but a sad part is they found him at night because he was scared of the dark and came out of hiding. When I was 19, in my first apartment, I had someone knock at the door. I looked through the peephole and saw this burly, heavy-set man who abruptly started screaming for me to let him in. He was yelling things like he was going to beat me up and kick the door down if I did not open. I called the cops, and as soon as someone got on the phone, he started body slamming my door trying to break in. I was freaking out and crying as they quickly had 5 cops show up within 5 minutes. As soon as he heard the sirens, he quickly walked away, and they met him at the bottom of the stairs. Apparently, he was after the previous renter but was extremely intoxicated. They arrested him, and thankfully he never came back. I ended up breaking my lease and moving out 3 months later. It was in a very nice neighborhood, but it quickly made me wish I was back home with family instead of being on the other side of the United States. This happened to me a couple of years ago. I have also lived on my own a long time, so I do not get scared easily. I had just finished reading in bed, turned my lamp off, and settled down to go to sleep, hugging my cat close to me. This would have been about 1:30 a.m. I closed my eyes and heard a voice say, "Meow," like it was imitating a cat. My window was open, so I thought it was just someone being weird outside. I opened my eyes, and in the middle of my bedroom was a small boy wearing a red jumper, waving his arm above his head. I leapt up like a goddamn ninja and turned the light on, my heart going mad. Nothing paranormal had ever happened in this house before, in all the time I had lived here. I spent the whole night totally freaked out, only getting a bit of sleep when it started to get light outside. My friends thought it was hilarious when I told them. I was saying there's no way I'm living in a haunted house and started googling cleansing, exorcists, and whatnot. The next few nights, other weird stuff started happening. I started sleeping with the TV on, and as soon as I tried to get any sleep, I would hear freaky voices coming from it, or I would notice shadows dip by the side of my bed. It was dreadful. I actually resorted to saying out loud, "I'm really tired, so if you could not haunt me for one night, I would be really grateful." I had never really believed in any of this sort of stuff before, so it was like an entire paradigm shift for me. Anyway, I was going on about this to my friends at work, and one of them asked if I was on drugs. Well, funnily enough, I had just started taking this new tablet, Montelukast, for my asthma. When I got home and read the side effects, one of the rare ones was hallucinations. Stop taking them, no more hauntings. My boyfriend worked away from home a lot, and I always struggled to sleep on the first night he was away. On this occasion, I was woken by the sound of a man shouting and then someone banging on wood or a front door. I jumped up and looked out my bedroom window, just in time to see a man dressed all in black walking through our garden toward the house. I ran to the front of the house to look out the front window and make sure he kept going. He did, but he met up with another man dressed in black walking toward my house. I was terrified and called the police. They arrived in a matter of minutes and checked out the back garden, but they were gone. Turns out a neighbor had caught them both trying to steal his car, and one had escaped through the gardens while the other had run through the roads. They had met up outside my house. I didn't sleep at all that night, and my brother came to stay the next night. I'm so glad I live in an apartment now, much more security. One afternoon, someone knocked at my back door. I thought it was the guy coming to read our meter, so I opened the door. Next thing I know, two huge guys pushed into the house, and one of them threw me up against the wall. Then they shoved me down on the couch. They told me they were Hell's Angels, and they were pissed because my boyfriend was selling too many drugs, cutting into their profits. They kept calling me by my next-door neighbor's name. We had suspected they were selling drugs. All the people stopping by for less than 5 minutes made it pretty obvious. I just kept telling them I was not her. One of them searched the house while the other kept me pinned to the couch. They started to realize they were in the wrong house, because they could not find anything where they were told it would be. My neighbor's house is a single floor with a basement. My house is a 4-level backsplit. Then I showed them my mail, because it had my name on it, and they realized they had messed up. They started telling me that they were after my neighbor's boyfriend because he had attacked their cousin, which I knew was nonsense, but I did not care, I just wanted them to leave. They robbed me of my cash and left. I now have locks on my screen doors.